Hello, this is Paul C.H.E.K. Welcome back to my video blog. Today I'd like to share that Matthew Walden, C.H.E.K instructor, highly skilled therapist, very intelligent man, and I published an article recently in the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapy called "The Ghost in the Machine: Is Musculoskeletal Medicine Lacking Soul?" I think it's a very, very important article, especially in the rehabilitation environment today for a variety of reasons. I will go through some key points that I've shared. So the main thrust of the blog today is to let you know that we did publish this article, and Penny will put a link on the screen where you can go read or download the article for free for a given period of time. I'm not exactly sure. It's a few weeks before they will start charging for the article. It's something like $35 for the article. So we're hoping you'll all read it for free because there's a lot of deep realization and truth about the current state of musculoskeletal medicine in the article. And it opens the door to some things that I think are long overdue for the entire medical and rehab community to look at more deeply. Now, certainly there are a number of therapists out there and doctors that are much more holistic in their approach. The problem is that they're by far the minority, and there is a massive sea of people who go from therapy appointment to therapy appointment and doctor to doctor and pill to pill, injection to injection, surgery to surgery. And unfortunately, they often get worse and worse, not to mention the fact that when you're using drugs, there's a lot of negative side effects. Every time you have a surgical intervention, you now have another injury that you have to rehabilitate from. So, having spent 32 years in this profession, I've seen many people's lives very seriously disrupted and even damaged by the conventional medical approaches. My feeling is for acute injuries, the conventional medical system or traditional medical system is effective. If you have a car accident, you get a concussion, you break a leg, any kind of trauma like that. But when it comes to rehabilitation of anything physical or psychological, unfortunately, the approaches are very caught in the concepts of Newtonian physics, which are now 100 years outdated with the quantum physics and the advancements of quantum physics and how we can apply that awareness in our daily life. Not to mention the fact that we have wandered very far from the wisdom of native cultures and the medicine men and the shaman that did a very, very good job with the tools that they had for thousands of years. So I think that what we're encouraging you to do in the article is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, acknowledge that a lot of the traditional approaches were very, very effective. In fact, most of the drugs that you have on the market, if you follow them back, a good percentage of them end up being things that are the byproducts or the synthetic byproducts of natural approaches that ultimately came from native traditions and native societies, only to be repackaged as something they could put a patent on, which means it usually has to be synthesized and it loses a lot of its natural harmonics and other medicinal values. Not to mention that when you use natural medicine, you develop an awareness of what the earth offers us in nature. But when you get caught in the traditional model, then it's just what pill do I take to get rid of the symptom, but it doesn't really look at the causes. So I'm going to go through a few bullet points now just to highlight some of the discussion so you have an idea of what Matthew and I are talking about in this article. And the article is certainly appropriate for medical doctors, neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons, and all the professional rehabilitation people, as well as those of you with a deep interest in the, shall we say, more scientific concepts of rehabilitation. Now, in the article, Matthew and I chose to look at dancing as sort of a correlate of what could be done through unguided, unbound, more playful self-expression via the vehicle of dance. Having rehabilitated more people than I can even begin to count, I've seen over and over again that people that are in pain who get involved in things like dance find that the joy, the spontaneity, the creative self-expression, the rhythmic movement actually has a natural medicating effect on pain, helps move energy through the body, through the chakra systems, helps unblock stagnant energy, helps lubricate joints that haven't been moving well, and really doesn't produce very much injury compared to many other categories of exercise, be it exercise or injuries on the workplace. So we wanted to look into dance to see how does the effects of dance work on the musculoskeletal system and the psyche of the individual. So that was sort of a correlate we used to make a comparison. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. Now, the traditional medical model uses really a linear causation model. This causes that, that causes this. So if you've seen a kinetic model with a bunch of steel balls hanging, you pick one ball up on one and let go, and the one on the far other side shoots off, but the ones in the middle don't move. That's a linear model. One of the main problems with traditional medicine and orthopedic rehabilitation is it's still very much based on a kinetic link system. Often you see, for example, the actions of a muscle explained in anatomy texts or in rehab training, but they don't tell you how, for example, the biceps interacts with the pectoralis minor, or how the biceps pec minor interacts with the external obliques, the internal obliques, the quadratus lumborum, the muscles of the legs. They don't look so much into these integrative systems, nor do they look at the effects of the subtle energy systems on the structural systems and many, many other things, such as the effect of the mind and the emotions on the physical systems. So we're really way outdated with that model. It's complex in the research because they get into a lot of elaborate models to try to explain things, but it's actually almost overly simplistic when it comes to how the human being actually functions in real life and how the subtle energy systems such as the emotions and the mind interface with the more tangible systems that are often addressed in rehabilitation, i.e. the musculoskeletal system. Now, what we're proposing is, as the article leads to, and then there's a follow-up practical paper, is that there are all systems with complexity have a simplistic foundation. So what we're showing is that a lot of the complexities in rehabilitation are overlooking the breaches of the simple things that ultimately, if not managed well, lead to problems in the musculoskeletal system. And if you don't look at those simple things, such as diet and lifestyle factors, then you will have repeated knee problems, repeated back problems, shoulders, necks, wrists, hands, and the list just goes on and on. One of the main things that is a key factor in orthopedic injuries or structural injuries of all types is inflammation. So there's all sorts of drugs you can use for that, but most of the people aren't looking, for example, at things like ergonomics or the things of home environment. How is the person's bed? Is their couch, their furniture, their chairs appropriate? Are they eating food additives, preservatives, colorings, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and other chemicals for which there is some 68,000 or more put into food, many of which are gastrointestinal inflammatory and produce systemic inflammation? And those things are rarely ever looked at, yet they basically sensitize the body, alter pH levels, making the body more acid in general, and set a person up for chronic musculoskeletal aches and pains that often will never go away without addressing something more simplistic. Are you eating effectively for your individual needs, as an example? We go into a lot about central sensitization to show how the nervous system basically gets sensitized by any variety of inputs. Remember, the pain system in the body operates in a parallel processing system. Unlike cognition, you can only process one thought at a time. So there you have a linear process. But when the body monitors pain inputs and physiological inputs such as biochemistry, the nervous system is taking in potentially billions of inputs per second, and it's making calculations at the unconscious level about how to manage that. So when we look at central sensitization, it's really basically the science shows that you can have global sensitization that sets you up for a lot more pain. So for example, if you're a carpenter swinging a hammer all day, but you've got 10 or 20 other factors sensitizing the system, you may have been a carpenter for 10 years and never had epicondylitis, but all of a sudden you're going through a divorce and you're getting epicondylitis, and your doctor and your therapist never even ask you about issues of your life or if you're having any challenges such as a divorce. And they don't, basically, even though the science is there, they don't make the connection that something like a painful event like going through a divorce could sensitize the whole system so that Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, and before the carpenter could recover from the stress on the musculoskeletal system of the workplace, but all of a sudden now they don't have adequate recovery due to central sensitization and or summation of pain inputs, and the body reacts on a global level. So the article gets into that and looks deeply into the science, the current science of central sensitization. We have to remember that the central nervous system is sensitizing physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual inputs. Spiritual here meaning one's sense of connection to a greater whole. You could also say that the word spiritual encompasses any belief system around religious ideology, for better or worse. And research does show that people that practice some kind of spiritual practice or religion have less disease and tend to recover better from most diseases or chronic ailments. And I believe we do reference resources citing that in the paper. We also have biopsychosocial medicine and psychoneuroimmunology. Biopsychosocial medicine looks at the biological components, the psychological components of the individual, and the social life of the individual to create a biopsychosocial model, which is really following the principles of central sensitization. And biopsychosocial medicine really does show that your social relationships, your biological relationships and functions, and your psychological state all can contribute to pretty much any problem, and that often to resolve even musculoskeletal issues, we have to look at the human being from a biological, psychological, and social perspective. Psychoneuroimmunology has been around for quite a while now. In psychoneuroimmunology, psycho, the psyche, or the soul, the soul means consciousness within. Psychoneuro, the nervous system, immunology, the immune system, and there's a mountain of literature showing that the way you think and what you believe has a huge impact on how much pain you feel and how quickly you recover from any disease, injury, or ailment. So there's two fields of medicine that are moving into the kinds of awareness that we're talking about in the article. Now, most people that are practicing the traditional model of musculoskeletal medicine really operate on a bottom-up model, which says that the pain issues and the problems that you're dealing with are coming from the body, therefore it must be a body problem. But biopsychosocial medicine, psychoneuroimmunology, metaphysics, spiritual studies, looking into shamanism and the work of medicine men throughout history, there's ample evidence to show that we have top-down causation, so our thoughts and our feelings ultimately have a huge influence on our physiological systems and therefore our ability to handle stress and recover from physical events, including injury. And the better we're doing with managing our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, the more durable we turn out to be from a physical perspective. And having worked with countless athletes, I can tell you that many times athletes hit plateaus or start getting injury or have a hard time recovering from injuries because they have something going on in their life that they're having a hard time dealing with, whether it be relationship problems, whether it be not liking the coach, or the having challenges with teammates, or squabbles in the family, or a death in the family. The list is very long. So we do talk about bottom-up and top-down causation in the article, and I think that's an important concept to understand. We also look at consciousness and pain. I use Edward Edinger's definition of consciousness. There's a few out there. I believe Itzhak Bentov said the consciousness of an individual is an expression of the total information carrying capacity. In other words, the more information you have access to and can use, the more conscious you are. Edward Edinger says consciousness is a psychic substance, meaning it's real, produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. So opposites is everything from north to south, up to down, concentric, eccentric, inside, outside, good and evil, should, shouldn't, etc. Those two polarities have to be in play for us to be conscious of anything. So when we're doing musculoskeletal rehab or any kind of rehabilitation in general, it's very important for us to remember that a lot of the things that people are coming to us for are events that have occurred that bring them into conscious awareness of how they've been managing themselves in whatever environment led to the injury, and the other environments that may be in the background contributing to the injury, so that they can become aware. And it's the job of the skilled therapist or physician to help make people aware. For example, if you just keep centralizing discs and sending people back to work, but you don't teach them how to eat right, or don't show them the connection between inflammation of the guts and stability of the spine and things like that, well, they're just going to keep re-injuring themselves. And the pain teacher keeps coming back with a vengeance. So the pain teacher is a term that I created many years ago to teach my students and my patients to be aware that pain's not something you want to drug out or just knock out. Pain is something that's there to make you aware of how you're managing yourself or the choices that you're making, so that you can develop a more conscious, active relationship with your life and make choices that are more life or dream affirmative. So the pain teacher, as I said, brings us into awareness, but it also brings the unconscious behaviors and practices and beliefs we have into conscious awareness. So, for example, if you're still caught in the old athlete paradigm of no pain, no gain, you may be your own biggest problem and not realize that the pain teacher is coming to teach you that instead of no pain, no gain, you need to take on a more updated concept called work hard, rest hard, as an example. We also have a massive amount of drugs in the traditional medical approach. And one of the problems with drugs, as beautiful as they are, and when they're needed, believe me, there's nothing better. But when they're abused, which they are in a massive way in our medical systems worldwide, it takes away the potential for the pain teacher to create the awareness, to guide an individual to asking better questions, finding a skilled therapist / teacher, and learning how to better manage themselves so that they don't keep recreating the problem. So drugs, in my opinion, are one of the biggest problems, because they stop a person from being aware of what they're creating and how they're doing it. I've seen many problems with pain medications, leaving people thinking they feel fine, yet they go out and start doing the activities that got them in trouble again and end up re-injured, not realizing that even though they don't have pain, they're more fragile now that they're injured or re-injured than they were before. So one of the things I would highlight in this regard is the questions that a shaman typically asks a person if they come to them with some kind of a challenge. The first one is, when did you stop singing? So if we look at the fact that happy people may not sing, but singing makes people happy, the shaman saying, when did you stop singing, is saying, when did you stop expressing yourself and using your own voice? Your own voice is very powerful. Your whole chakra system, every part of your body is responsive to vibration. And when we learn how to use our voice and we express ourselves through voice, we unconsciously or consciously can use our voice through singing to create resonant frequencies that harmonize our chakras and our biological systems that can either improve resistance to illness and injury or enhance our ability to recover. The shaman will ask you, when did you stop dancing? So we're back to why we chose a couple of papers, one on dance and one on Zumba dance. Dancing is unbound play. When you're dancing, you're not supposed to care what you look like. You're not supposed to be worried about other people's opinions. You're supposed to just move to the music and express yourself freely. And because there's a lot of rhythmic oscillation in dance, it has the effect of moving subtle energy through the systems. It can trigger a rising of Kundalini energy or consciousness, making us more aware. It's a source of joy. Due to the proprioceptive influence of movement, it can have tremendous enhancements for levels of pain. In other words, because the proprioceptive system moves faster in its impulse delivery or the rate of conduction than the nociceptive system, when people are enjoying dance, they can have natural pain management. And if they would dance and sing more, they probably would get injured less and need a lot less drugs, which would mean a lot less toxicity on the system, and the opportunity to learn that there are natural things like singing and dancing that are very, very healing and therapeutic. The shaman will also ask you, when did you stop enjoying stories? What you find when you're working in rehabilitation is there's two kinds of people. Those that are totally identified with what they're doing, be it their work as a lawyer, a doctor, a therapist, a counselor, a builder, etc. And they're so engaged in it that they have lost their sense of self beyond work, and many of them are spending more money than they have, so they get caught in this trap of working for identity, but also working to try to uncover the mountain of bills they have, and they lose themselves, and they don't take the time to really enjoy singing, dancing, or stories because life becomes too serious for them. Also, when you're enjoying singing and dancing and stories, you bring yourself back more into the connection with the inner child, the playful child, somebody that's not so bound by rules, regulations, and taboos, which, because of the religious programming in the Western culture, all cultures, but the Western culture's religious programming is much more restrictive, causes a lot more internal pressure than most of the Eastern religious philosophies, and leads to a lot of guilt and shame. So if we are singing and dancing and enjoying stories, the inner child in us has a chance to take a break from all that, shall we say, adult compression, if you will. I could think of other names to call it, but we'll stick to that. The shaman also will ask you, when did you lose your sense of the magic, mystery, and awe for living? And a lot of people that get injured and see doctors and therapists are injured because they're living such a flat life that there is no joy for them. So their overall physiological state is mirroring their mental, emotional state. And oftentimes when people are living trapped in all these religious ideologies and shoulds and shouldn'ts and rules and regulations, they lose their sense of spontaneity and joyfulness in life. And they get so trapped down here with this kind of nose to the television screen that they lose sight of the bigger picture, which is the awesome wild and crazy fact that it takes an entire universe to create every one of us, and that everything in the universe is interconnected, and that all of us is acting out a part in a universal play, and that we're all here to learn to live and love more fully and gain the support of each other. And so when a person loses touch with that, the world can become very flat, and a person can feel isolated, and anxiety and depression are much more common, which triggers a lot of adrenal stress, which leads to depletion of energy, depletion of recovery capacity, shifts in the hormonal system that are not supportive of our anabolic systems. And then you end up laying on a table somewhere with a non-contact ACL injury, somebody ultrasounding you when that's not the best idea, but that's what they were trained to do, or icing and electrical stimulation, and then the drugs, and nobody's ever really looking into what is the real drivers that are sensitizing your central nervous system, leading to an inability to adapt to your internal psychological or external environments. And an inability to adapt is really what causes pain and leads to injury. And the final question most medicine men or shaman will ask is, when did you stop enjoying being alone with yourself? So all of these questions are really playing into the concept of soul. Are we lacking soul? So if we're not looking into those issues and we're doing musculoskeletal rehab, then we're really just treating the body as a series of levers and pulleys and a kinetic model, and trying to use fancy-dancy chemistry, which isn't even that fancy. It's old and outdated. If you look at the advances in chemistry and you look at things like sonic geometry and the correlation between geometry and chemistry and energy medicine, mountains and mountains of the drugs people are using today could be eliminated if they actually were using current energy medicine technologies, which work as good or better without the toxicity. And even things like sound healing, tuning forks, biofield therapies, and things like that. So we have the pain teacher, which helps bring us into conscious awareness of unconscious behaviors, which is a beautiful function of pain that traditional musculoskeletal rehabilitation and other forms of rehab often do not look at. So the soul, as I said, is the consciousness within you, which is the subjective elements, and the body is objective. If someone says to you, "Where do you hurt?" you're likely to say, "My back." That means that you are perceiving your back or your body as an object. What's perceiving it as soul is your subjective elements. The conscious element is subjective. It cannot be weighed, measured, or confined through a Newtonian model of physics, although quantum physics is a much better approach for that. So when we really get down to it, we need to be more aware of the subjective elements of a person's life, such as relationships, such as what brings you joy. You know, we have a whole culture worldwide of people that go to work to make money, but don't start living until they get home. And oftentimes the stress of the rat race is so much that they have to medicate themselves with alcohol, a wide variety of prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, cigarettes, whatever it might be. And I'm not against the use of recreational drugs at all, but I'm against the use of recreational drugs that are actually numbing choices that you're making without realizing that the only one that can change your environment is you, which requires that you become conscious about what you really want, i.e., what is your dream and what are you willing to do to move toward that, which is a key element in effective rehabilitation. What is it that you really want to experience in your life? Without that, it's hard to get a lot of people inspired to rehabilitate themselves, because for a lot of people, it's the first time they've had someone listen to them. It's the first time somebody's touched them and really take a genuine interest in them. So countless is the number of patients that I've had that didn't want to leave rehabilitation because to go back to work meant to go back to just being a cog in a wheel and not getting the kind of connection, empathy, compassion, and love, if you will, that therapists often provide, which is a sad situation. If we were more healthy in our approach to rehabilitation and life, then people would be excited to get back to work so they could sing, dance, act out the stories, enjoy spending time with themselves, and have fun exploring the world, whether it be hiking in nature, doing sports, etc. But oftentimes it's just not that way. So I talked briefly about spirituality and musculoskeletal pain, but remember, spirituality is all about your connection to the greater whole. We couldn't be here without the earth. So if we're not connected to and aware of what the earth provides for us, and what are the things that we need from the earth, such as clean water, non-toxic food, fresh air, adequate breathing, and adequate movement, then you can rehab and rehab and rehab, but you're never going to actually be able to address the real problem. And a person who is not spiritually connected really has only their work and their bills and television at night. And usually the television's more stories about people that are living the same way, so it's often not inspiring. Now, we do also talk about the 4 doctors and the 4 quadrants. We follow the paper up with a practical paper, and in the article we do allude to the fact that when we break life down into 4 doctors, Dr. Happiness, what am I willing to live for, manage myself for, and have healthy relationships for? What's my inspiration and motivation? Dr. Diet, how should I be eating to meet my individual needs, and what's the consequences of not engaging myself so that I'm aware of what I need from meal to meal or day to day? Dr. Quiet, how much rest do I need to let my body recover effectively? And you look at the statistics on sleep, it's terrible. For example, the average college student in big surveys has been found to only get 4.7 hours of sleep. Well, that's a disaster, especially if you're a college athlete. And many adults are, running around 5.5, 6 hours of sleep at night, but most people need 8 hours of sleep at night on average, and it needs to follow the sun cycle, because if you go to bed too late, your hormonal system is not going to be able to do the work that it's designed to do because of the cycles of hormonal flow. So you might get 8 hours of sleep. If you go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning in sleep hours, your body's ability to repair itself is not going to be ideal for a physical injury. I go into that in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. So we've got Dr. Movement next. If we don't have an awareness of what each person needs to do, what are the 7 primal patterns? Squatting, lunging, bending, pushing, pulling, twisting, and gait, which is walking, jogging, and running. How do we use movement to cultivate more life force energy? So these are some of the things that we get into in the practical paper in more depth. And on our webinar, we'll talk more and give you a chance to ask as many questions as we can possibly answer. And then we've got Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants, and that's how basically you could say life unfolds. So it's in the article. I don't want to take the time to go into it right now. But if you look at the 4 quadrant model, you'll find that traditional rehabilitation approaches are really a 1 quadrant approach, which is in Ken Wilber's model, which is a cross. The upper right hand is the personal exterior, which is anything that can be weighed or measured, whether it be electroencephalograms, electrocardiograms, velocity, force, joint range of motion, anything you can weigh or measure. And that's where musculoskeletal rehabilitation focuses on, but that leaves out the personal interior, upper left quadrant, which is the inner life of the individual, the collective interior, which is the relationships and their effects on each individual, family, friends, society, and the lower right quadrant is the stage of the world, the workplace, the ergonomics, the toxicity in the environment, or the benefits of a natural environment and things like that. So we've really got a rehabilitation system that's really caught in one quadrant or is only addressing 1/4 of the reality of life. So our article looks into all these things, and the practical paper goes a little deeper but is quite practical. And the webinar that we're offering is a chance for you to look deeper at the model that I've developed and some other complementary approaches, which is the 4-doctor model, and things like the 6 foundation principles that we teach in the CHEK Holistic Lifestyle Program: nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. And I think for the rehabilitationists, it'll help you have a much broader, more comprehensive picture. And for those of you that say, well, what do I do now? Well, the good news is I've spent 32 years of my life developing educational systems to teach that. And Matthew Walden is not, like I said, he's a CHEK instructor who started going into my training right close to when he was finished with osteopathic and naturopathic school. So he's an ND and a DO, and he applies these technologies all the time and lectures in physical therapy schools, osteopathic schools, and many other places to help share these concepts. So whether you're a medical doctor, a surgeon, a physiotherapist, chiropractor, osteopath, massage therapist, strength coach, personal trainer, CHEK professional, I'm sure there's going to be something interesting and useful for you that we will share through these articles and the webinar. So thanks for joining me today. Thank you again, Matthew, for working with me to publish this beautiful article in a highly reputable journal, the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapy. And I look forward to hearing your comments after you read the article. Feel free to email us either through the CHEK Institute, or you can share in the comment section on my YouTube channel where you might be looking at this, or Facebook. And please join the webinar with us, and we would love to go much deeper. Thanks for joining me. I'm Paul C.H.E.K.